This is Duke University.
On my way over here today, I was actually stopped by somebody with a clipboard who wanted to know if I would sign a petition to ban fracking in North Carolina. And that is not the first time I've been asked if I want to ban fracking in North Carolina. You've probably seen the same sorts of petitions. You've probably seen bumper stickers, especially in places like Chapel Hill and Durham, that say no fracking in North Carolina. But what I'm going to argue today is that whether we should frack or not is not really the question that we should be asking. Instead, we should be asking, how does fracking fit into our larger energy economy? Does it make sense to frack sometimes? Maybe yes. Does it not make sense other times? Probably. So what are the conditions that would make fracking more attractive? And also, what happens if we ban fracking? Can that have unintended consequences? In particular, banning fracking might promote the use of coal in certain areas. So, I'll use this over here. Maybe. I think. Could be possible. I think the advancer is not advancing. Yeah. It's all right. Okay. So, getting back to the idea that I was mentioning before, fracking is a very divisive issue. If you live in an urban area like I do, maybe you've seen signs like this. There are a lot of environmental groups that are strongly opposed to fracking. They say it's an environmental catastrophe and we should put bans on the practice. On the other hand, there are those who support fracking, think that we should pursue the practice, and any environmental regulation is an economic hindrance and should be avoided. And it's as American as apple pie, as you can see here. So why wouldn't we do it? But like I said before, I want to look at fracking in the context of energy more broadly. So to do that, I'm going to step back for a second and look at energy use worldwide over the past 60 years or so. So here's energy use by country, and what I'm going to show you here is a time series since 1960 of energy use in a variety of different countries around the world. I'm going to focus on two in particular, the United States and China. So those two countries will be highlighted on this graph. The data for China begins in 1971, so that's when it'll show up. And also the size of that circle represents the population of the country. So you can see energy use rising in both countries. And I'm going to stop right here because we're about to see a huge transition. Notice energy use in China has been increasing at a fairly steady rate. This is the year 2000. And now, over the past 10 years, energy use in China has been increasing at over 10% per year, at a rate that's completely unprecedented in human history. So that's a huge increase in energy. And meanwhile, energy use in the United States is already pretty high. So I'm going to focus, like I said, on those two countries. And first, I'm going to talk about the US, and then transition to China. So here is energy use in the US for the last 240 years. There's a couple things going on here. First is that there's three different eras of energy use highlighted on this graph. First, we had the age of wood. Then we transitioned to using coal for energy. And then in about 1950, energy use from oil increased dramatically. The first thing I want to point out is that our energy use from coal right here is actually higher than it was in 1950. So the age of coal never really ended. We're still using a ton of coal in this country. The other thing is that even though we're currently in the age of oil, oil is used primarily for transportation. When I'm talking about coal versus natural gas is used primarily for electricity generation and heating. So I'm going to focus only on electricity generation. And I'm going to zoom in right on that time period at the end. And like I said, focusing here on electricity generation. So in the past 15 years or so, coal use has started declining a little bit. It's shown in black. Natural gas use is increasing a little bit here in purple. The amount of nuclear energy has remained pretty constant. And the energy from hydropower and wind power have also remained pretty constant during that time period. So this increase in natural gas use around 2008 And the reduction in coal use is a direct result of the increased natural gas supply due to hydraulic fracturing. And I'm going to argue that anything we can do to reduce our reliance on coal is a good thing. Here's a coal mine in eastern Kentucky. This is a mountaintop removal operation, very typical of the facilities where we get our coal from in this country. Typically, the tops of these mountains are removed, dumped into the valleys surrounding those mountains. This causes severe environmental harm in these areas. So coal mining definitely harms the environment. It harms ecologically important headwater streams in these mountain areas. Burning coal is also bad for the environment. So burning coal releases things like sulfur, mercury. These cause sickness in areas that are around coal-burning power plants. And also, burning coal releases more CO2 than burning natural gas. So for the same amount of energy, burning coal produces 2 to 3 times as much CO2 as burning natural gas. So if we convert power plants from coal to natural gas, we can get the same amount of energy with much less CO2 emissions. I'm going to go back now, as promised, and talk about the other country on here, China. So where is that large increase in energy in China coming from? Primarily from coal. China burns more coal than the US, and in fact, 75% of their energy, represented here in black, come from burning coal. Just like the US, China has large reserves of natural gas. So what I'm showing here is natural gas reserves all over the world. The 2 countries with the largest natural gas reserves are the US and China. So again, just like the US, China has large natural gas reserves, heavy reliance on coal. Switching from coal to natural gas for electricity generation could result in substantially lower CO2 emissions. So here is a gas well in suburban Fort Worth, Texas. This is the birthplace of fracking, the area where this technology was developed over the past 20 years or so. And the question, if I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we should be pursuing fracking as a way to have lower CO2 energy supplies, is fracking safe? That's the big question. And the scientific answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. So there are cases where people's water have definitely been contaminated, but fracking is not a guarantee that water supplies will be contaminated. There's plenty of cases where I've visited people's homes who have fracking wells near their homes but have no problem with their water wells. On the other hand, there are people who have fracking wells 3, 4, maybe 5 miles away from their homes, and their water supplies are negatively impacted. So the more studies that we do, the more time that we spend studying the impacts of fracking, the more knowledge we have about how to predict where these potential damages are going to occur. For example, new research in Pennsylvania is starting to suggest that river valleys generally lead to, drilling in river valleys generally leads to more contamination of water supplies. Drilling near geologic faults also tends to lead to more contamination of water supplies. There's also technological fixes that can reduce a lot of the problems that we've seen in other areas. The problem is that these technologies are expensive, and if companies aren't legally required to use them, sometimes they don't choose to. So encouraging companies to utilize the best available technology takes regulation, and it also takes more enforcement of those regulations. Not everybody believes that fracking can be done safely under any circumstances, though. And so I would say that if you still hate fracking, that's fine. But just like in politics, you can't beat something with nothing. So if you're going to oppose fracking, support renewable energy at the same time so that you're not supporting coal by opposing fracking. And some ways to support renewable energy. First of all, reducing energy use reduces demand for all fossil fuels like coal and natural gas together. Buying renewable energy credits from your electricity supplier can encourage them to invest in renewable energy sources. And lastly, promoting carbon taxes. Carbon taxes are a way to disincentivize fuels that emit large amounts of CO2, especially coal, but also natural gas. And with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions in a moment.